Hey guys, Yips here coming with another video, and this one today is going to be about Absolute Corruption versus Contagion. So these are two talents that a lot of people have a lot of questions in which one they should be running, and the reason is they're both very powerful, but they're both very powerful in different situations. And hopefully with this video today, you're going to be able to make a little bit better informed situations in Nighthold or whatever you're doing about which talent choices you want to run. So let's just jump right into it. So what is Absolute Corruption? Absolute Corruption is an ability that just makes your corruption permanent. It's just a passive, so every time you press Corruption, it will be a permanent dot on the target that you will also deal 25% increased damage. And Contagion is whenever you cast Unstable Affliction on a target, for the duration of that Unstable Affliction, the Unstable Affliction, all of your dots, drain soul, your pet, everything, will be dealing 18% more damage, okay? So you might think, okay, well 18% is a lot, this is the obvious choice, and actually it's not the obvious choice simply because the amount of 1, globals that Absolute Corruption saves, and 2, the ability to abuse it as a passive. So let's talk a little bit about what situations you can abuse both of these talents. So a situation where you can abuse Absolute Corruption is a boss like Helia, okay? Helia is a great example of this. In phase 1, there are all those slimes that spawn. You can put Corruption on all of them. They won't be fading, they'll last permanently, plus they're doing 25% additional damage. Not only that, in phase 2, when all the tentacles spawn underground, you can run around and you can dot all of them up with Corruption, and those will all be ticking forever. But not only that, they'll also be taking 25% harder, so you're just going to gain a ton of damage by dotting 5 or 6 tentacles permanently for over a minute long. That's a huge damage increase on a boss fight where there's a lot of AoE going on and you're spreading Corruption on everything. Your Corruption is just hitting 25% harder is just something that is totally invaluable. On a boss fight where you have a lot of globals to sit there and spam drain with Malefic Grasp, Absolute Corruption, again, saving yourself that global, saves a lot of time, gets a lot more damage out of drain. So the kind of theme here that I'm getting at is a fight where you can abuse it on a lot of ads is definitely going to be a situation where you're going to want to be running Absolute Corruption. High Botanist is a great example. Dragons of Nightmare is a great example. Those are boss fights where you're going to just generate so much benefit from Absolute Corruption that's going to be the talent that you want to run, okay? So now let's talk about boss fights where you can abuse Contagion. So boss fights where you can abuse Contagion is stuff like Ursoc, it's going to be stuff like Triliax, it's going to be stuff like Guarm. And the reason you can abuse Contagion on bosses like this is because there's no ad spawning. There's not many globals for you to use. And so since there's not many globals for you to be using, this means that you're going to have a high uptime on Unstable Affliction on one target, and you're going to be able to abuse that on the boss, okay? Another good situation where you can abuse this is on 2 to 3 target cleave when running Writhe and Agony. You can Contagion all the mobs with all your dots. All of your dots are going to be hitting 18% harder on every single mob. That's obviously very beneficial if you're able to sustain high UA uptime on those 3 mobs. So those are kind of situations where you can abuse Contagion, and the main abusability of this talent is on single target fights, okay? So that's kind of how you want to make your decision. You want to be like, okay, can I abuse this? If I can, yes, I want to take it. Can I abuse this one? Yes, I can, and I want to take it. Now, that's just for fights in general. So now we have to talk about the talents that work well, the talents that sort of synergize with these, with Contagion and Absolute Corruption, okay? So the talents that really synergize well with Contagion and Absolute Corruption are going to be between Malefic Grasp and Writhe and Agony. Haunt is not really a factor right now in raiding. In Mythic Plus, it tends to be an okay spec to play, but for the most part in raiding, most Warlocks will always be running Writhe and Agony or Malefic Grasp. So let's talk about the situations that are appropriate to be running Writhe and Agony or Malefic Grasp with Contagion and Absolute Corruption, okay? So let's just, for sake of purposes of talking about talents, let's always assume for AoE, you're going to be taking Absolute Corruption, and let's always assume, we're not going to assume anything for single target, but for multi-target, we'll always just assume we're going to be taking Absolute Corruption. For single target, that's where it's going to vary, so let's talk about single target, okay? So for a single target boss fight like Triliax or like Guarm or something like that, you're going to be wanting to run Contagion when you're running either of these 2 specs, okay? Malefic Grasp, Contagion, Siphon Life, and Soul Conduit, but as soon as you change to running Soul Effigy, you want to run Absolute Corruption when you're running with Malefic Grasp. And the reason being is because you don't want to be using that extra global every single time on your soul effigy, refreshing corruption, simply because you want a high drain soul uptime. High drain soul uptimes means your dots are ticking for 70% more, and as your dots are ticking 70% harder, having that additional uptime is just so beneficial that it outweighs the additional 18% damage every single time you cast a UA, okay? So this is the build you're going to want to be to run on single target for Malefic Grasp. Remember I said if from AoE, always run Absolute Corruption in the scenarios that I'm talking about, okay? So those are the two variations for Malefic Grasp. Now let's talk about Writhe and Agony, okay? With Writhe and Agony, you're always going to be wanting to run Contagion with Soul Effigy on multi-target. Now you're wondering, okay, why? I have Soul Effigy, the situation is the same. The situation is actually much different, and the reason being is because with Writhe and Agony, it's much less dependent on casting Drain Soul. It's much more dependent on spamming dots and maintaining UA uptime. So, therefore, what you're going to want to need to run is Contagion, maintain 3 dots on your effigy, maintain 3 dots on the boss, and just maintain a cycle of UAs, okay? This is just going to allow you to increase all of your dot damage by 18%, which is really powerful, and your Drain Soul, while it's a small amount of damage, is not a huge factor. The extra 2 globals every, 20 seconds that you'll be saving with Absolute Corruption simply is not worth it. So, just a quick recap of the video. What you're going to want to do is basically, can you abuse Absolute Corruption? Yes, you can. Go ahead and run it. On single target, should you pick Contagion? It depends on your talents. So that's what I wanted to talk about you guys today. Thanks for all the feedback on my other videos. I have been reading all the comments. I'll probably be getting back to them today or tomorrow. And I'm probably going to be coming out with another Nighthold video today or tomorrow as well. So I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you guys later.